court interpreter sitting beside the defendant's table that afternoon, a soft-spoken woman named Lourdes who had translated in this building for 22 years, and who had in those years heard nearly every kind of testimony a witness chair could carry, could tell by the third sentence of the labor inspector's sworn answer that he was lying. She did not need to know labor law to know it. She only needed to watch the inspector's left hand. The hand did not match the mouth. The mouth said one thing about the kitchen. The hand, resting flat on the wood of the rail, was doing the small involuntary tapping that hands do when their owner has not, in his 32 years on the job, ever been called on quite this hard. She did not say anything. It was not her job to say anything. Her job was to lean to the defendant's ear, and in the careful Spanish she had grown up with on a rancho in the Val de San Luis, repeat the inspector's English answer in a voice the defendant could hold on to. The defendant, a man named Eduardo Salinas who owned and ran a small breakfast and lunch restaurant called El Sol on the south side, was 47 years old. He had bought the building in 2014 with a small business loan and the labor of two brothers who had since moved on. He had run the restaurant since, with his wife Marisol and his sister-in-law Lucia. He paid every employee on the books on time in full with proper overtime. He had every receipt. He had every payroll record. He had every video file from the 4 ceiling cameras the city had told him, in 2021, to install. And yet here he was, in federal courtroom 15 on a Tuesday afternoon, on the brink of being convicted of a 6-count federal indictment for systematic wage theft and tax evasion. He had been brought there by the sworn testimony of the man in the witness box, Inspector Roy Kearns, 18 years with the State Labor Commission, whose certified inspection report had become Exhibit 1 of the prosecution's case. The report described, in detail, a kitchen where Salinas paid his employees a flat $120 a day in cash regardless of hours, who falsified the time clock at the end of each week, who threatened workers who complained, who kept no real receipts because no real receipts were ever issued. The report had cited specific dates, specific times, specific quotations the inspector had attributed to specific named employees. It had become, when the federal prosecutors had picked the case up the year before, the spine of the indictment. It had carried so much weight that Salinas had spent 11 months in pretrial supervision, had been forced to take out a second mortgage on the building to pay his legal bills, and had, until that afternoon, been one good day away from prison. What no one in the courtroom that afternoon yet knew, except possibly Salinas, his attorney, his wife Marisol in the third row, and the interpreter Lourdes who was already watching Kearns's left hand, was that the 4 ceiling cameras Salinas had installed in 2021 were still in place, still operating, and that every single date and time Kearns had cited in his sworn report had been recorded, in 4 angles. On a hard drive that had been quietly forensically copied the previous Friday by a state-certified video technician, at the request of Salinas's defense attorney. The defense attorney's name was Aisha Boateng. She was 31 years old, second chair at a small civil rights firm that took, on average, 2 criminal cases a year, and she had inherited the Salinas case 6 months earlier from a senior partner who had retired. She had spent every weekend of the last 6 months in the restaurant after hours with Salinas and Marisol going through the time-stamped video files, the time clock data, the payroll runs, the receipts, the W-2s, and the actual signed weekly pay stubs that 15 current and former employees had brought her voluntarily in small, careful folders. She had not, until that morning, played any of the video files in court. She had wanted first to let Kearns put every detail of his report on the sworn record. Kearns had obliged. He had described under direct examination an inspection on the morning of March 14th at 10:15 in which he had personally observed Salinas hand a stack of unmarked $20 bills to a dishwasher, and instruct the man in Spanish to make himself disappear before the rest of the week. He had described an inspection on April 2nd at 3 in the afternoon in which Salinas had, in the inspector's hearing, told a cook that if the cook did not stop asking about overtime he could find another country to work in. He had described, on May 11th at 11:30 in the morning, a back-office conversation he claimed to have witnessed through the open door between Salinas and his wife Marisol, in which the couple discussed altering the time clock that night. He had described in total 7 specific incidents on 5 specific dates, each one supported in his report by what he called the inspector's contemporaneous field notes. He had been on the stand for nearly 2 hours. He had not, in those 2 hours, ever once been less than entirely confident. Boateng had cross-examined him for the first 10 minutes only on technicalities, She had walked him carefully back through each of the 7 incidents. She had asked him to confirm the dates and times. He had confirmed them. She had asked him to confirm that he had been personally present in the restaurant for each one. He had confirmed it. She had asked him to confirm that his field notes were contemporaneous and that the field notes formed the basis of the report. He had confirmed it. She had asked him whether, in his 18 years as a labor inspector, he had ever falsified a report. He had answered with what Lourdes would later describe as just slightly too much warmth, that he had not. Then Boateng had said, "Your Honor, the defense moves to enter Exhibit D, the 4-camera continuous video record of El Sol restaurant from March 1st to May 15th of last year, forensically copied and time-stamped by certified technician, into evidence." The prosecutor at the government's table had risen. He had begun to object. Judge Okonkwo had lifted a hand. Judge Tanya Okonkwo had been on the federal bench for 11 years. She was 56. She had taught evidence law at a state university for the 7 years before that. She had a soft voice and a careful posture, and had, in her time on the bench, become the kind of judge that defense attorneys requested by name when their entire case turned on a single piece of evidence being given a fair hearing. "I'll allow the exhibit subject to authentication," Judge Okonkwo had said. "Ms. Boateng, authenticate." Boateng had called the state-certified technician, a methodical woman named Park, who had testified for 9 minutes about the chain of custody of the hard drive, the forensic copy, the timestamp validation, and the metadata that confirmed every file's date, time, and angle. Judge Okonkwo had asked 2 precise questions. She had said, "The exhibit is admitted. Ms. Boateng, you may proceed." Boateng had asked Kearns to please remain on the stand. She had then walked over to the defense table, opened her laptop, and connected it to the courtroom's overhead screen. "Inspector Kearns," she had said, "you testified under oath that you were personally present at El Sol restaurant on March 14th at 10:15 in the morning. Is that still your testimony?"
It is.
You testified that at that time you personally observed Mr. Salinas hand a stack of unmarked $20 bills to a dishwasher and instruct him in Spanish to make himself disappear. Is that still your testimony?
It is.
Boateng had clicked. What the courtroom saw, on the overhead screen, was camera 2 of El Sol restaurant on March 14th at 10:15 in the morning. Angle covered the entire front of house, the door to the kitchen, and the cashier station. Eduardo Salinas was visible at the cashier station wearing a clean white apron, talking on the phone in profile. He stayed there on the phone for the next 9 minutes. He did not move. He did not approach a dishwasher. There was no dishwasher in the camera's view. The kitchen door in the background was closed. There was no inspector in the frame. There was no inspector in the frame of camera 1, the back of house. There was no inspector in the frame of camera 3, the back alley dish station. There was no inspector in the frame of camera 4, the office. There was, in every single one of those 4 simultaneously running streams across the entire window from 10:03 to 10:31 in the morning of March 14th, no Inspector Roy Kearns present in El Sol restaurant. The courtroom did not speak. The court reporter did not stop typing. The prosecutor at the government's table did not stand. Lourdes beside Salinas did not lean to translate, because there was nothing in that long, slow 4-angle silence to translate. Boateng clicked again. April 2nd, 3 in the afternoon, the same 4 cameras, the same building, the same patient sweep through every angle from 2:45 to 3:20. There was no inspector. There was a regular Tuesday lunch rush, the cook visible at the line, Salinas pouring coffee at the counter, Marisol bringing a plate to the corner foretop, a dishwasher in the back hauling racks at the speed of a man who had nothing on his mind but racks. There was no inspector. Boateng clicked again. May 11th. 11:30 in the morning, the office angle, Salinas was visible in the office. He was alone. He was at his desk doing paperwork. Marisol was not in the office. Marisol, on camera 2, was at the cashier station running a credit card. The back office conversation Inspector Kearns had testified to under oath, the conversation between husband and wife in which the couple had supposedly discussed altering the time clock that night, had not, by simultaneous 4-angle video evidence, occurred at all. The couple had not, at 11:30 on May 11th, been in the same room. Boateng said very evenly, "Inspector Kearns, is it your testimony that the cameras are lying?" Kearns said nothing. Boateng said, "Inspector Kearns, is it your testimony that the time stamps are lying?" Kearns said nothing. Judge Okonkwo said, "The witness will answer the question." Kearns said finally, I don't. Judge Okonkwo said, Inspector Kearns, I am going to ask you a single question. I am going to ask it once on the record, under the oath you took at 10 this morning. Were you, on March 14th, April 2nd, and May 11th of last year, physically present at El Sol restaurant? Yes or no? The courtroom held very still. Lourdes watched the left hand. The left hand had stopped tapping. The left hand was now very deliberately flat. Lourdes had translated in 22 years the small grammar of every kind of broken man. She knew without any English what was about to come. Kearns said no. It took, from the moment Aisha Boateng had played the first frame of camera 2 to the moment Inspector Roy Kearns said the word no, exactly 12 minutes. Judge Okonkwo did not raise her voice. She did not allow herself a long pause. She lifted her pen and spoke. On the record before the court, the defense has presented forensically authenticated, time-stamped, four-angle continuous video evidence that directly and conclusively contradicts the sworn testimony of the government's lead witness. The witness has, under continued oath, admitted that he was not present at the dates and times he testified to under oath. The court finds that the government's witness has, in this proceeding, committed perjury. The court will refer this matter, by separate written order, to the United States Attorney's Office for a perjury investigation. The court will further refer the conduct of the witness to the Disciplinary Committee of the State Labor Commission and to the State Inspector General for review of his 18-year inspection record and any other cases in which his sworn reports formed the basis of charges. The court orders the inspection report, Exhibit 1, struck from the record in its entirety. The court orders the government to consider on an expedited basis whether the indictment can proceed without the stricken report. Government, do you wish to be heard? The lead prosecutor stood. He had been doing this work for 14 years. He had a daughter Eduardo Salinas's daughter's age. He had not, until that morning, ever heard a witness of his department's give the answer he had just heard. He said very evenly, Your Honor, the government moves to dismiss the indictment in its entirety, with prejudice, with apologies to Mr. Salinas and his family. Judge Okonkwo said, The motion is granted. The indictment is dismissed with prejudice. Mr. Salinas, you may stand. Eduardo Salinas stood. Lourdes stood next to him because that was her job. Marisol stood in the third row. Judge Okonkwo looked for one short second at Eduardo Salinas. She did not say everything she could have said. She said only, Mr. Salinas, the court owes you an apology. The court extends it on the record. You have, by your patience and your records, made the truth available to this court. The court has used it. You are free to go. Your pretrial supervision is lifted. Your second mortgage is, of course, your own legal matter, but the court will, by separate order, refer your case to the Federal Innocent Defendant Fee Reimbursement Program and to the office that handles civil claims of this kind against the State Inspection Commission. Walk out, Mr. Salinas. Walk out with your wife. We are adjourned. Eduardo Salinas did not in that moment weep. He nodded once to the bench. He turned. He walked the 7 careful steps to the rail. Marisol came forward through the gate. She put both her hands on his face. She did not say anything. Lourdes, who had translated for them both for the entire 11 months of the case, stepped quietly back and let them have the moment. Aisha Boateng, behind them, gathered her laptop into her bag without rushing. In the back of the courtroom, 15 of Salinas's current and former employees who had come on their own time and at their own expense to sit through the morning, a line cook in a clean blue shirt, 3 dishwashers in pressed pants, a server who had brought her 2 grown daughters with her, a woman in a hijab who had been a prep cook at El Sol for 6 years and whose green card had been at risk if the indictment had stuck, stood, without anyone telling them to, and remained standing until Eduardo and Marisol Salinas had walked together past the rail and down the center aisle and through the heavy oak doors at the back. Then they sat. They did not cheer. They did not raise their voices. They had none of them come to cheer. They had come, every one of them, to be counted by the record. The record had counted them. Outside the courthouse, on the wide stone steps, the late afternoon light was slanting low through the oaks. Lourdes, the interpreter, walked out alone, 10 minutes behind the others, because she had stayed to finish translating the dismissal order line by line for a juror who had asked. She passed the Salinas family by the bottom step. Marisol embraced her. Eduardo took her hand in both of his. He said in Spanish, the kind of thank you that does not translate into English no matter how good the translator is. Lourdes nodded. She told him gently that it was the cameras that had spoken. It was, she said, the cameras and the patient hands of Ms. Boateng. He shook his head and said also in Spanish that it was the room. He said the room had listened. He said the judge had listened. He said this was a country where on a Tuesday afternoon the room could still listen. Lourdes did not that evening tell him about the left hand. She thought on the bus home that perhaps she would one day tell him. She thought also that perhaps it did not matter. The hand had been a small private signal between her and the man in the witness chair, a signal the chair had eventually surrendered on its own. Justice had not, in this case, required the interpreter to speak. Justice had only required the building to do what the building was built for. The building had done it. The cameras had done their part. The judge had done hers. The defense attorney had done 6 months of patient, quiet work. The witness had eventually told the truth because the room had given the truth no other choice. The Salinas family had, by sundown, gone home. A month later, the perjury investigation would result in the State Inspector General's office opening a review of every one of Inspector Roy Kearns's sworn reports from his 18-year career. The review would find, by autumn, that 9 other small business prosecutions that had relied on his sworn testimony in the previous 4 years involved the same pattern. By the end of the year, 8 of those 9 defendants, 6 of them, like Salinas, small immigrant restaurant owners on the south and east sides of the city, would see their cases dismissed and their records expunged. Aisha Boateng would, by the following spring, find her small civil rights firm carrying 12 new cases on contingency from the same office referrals. She would, the spring after that, hire a third attorney. She would name her firm when she signed the new lease, after the kind of patient, quiet practice that had let her watch a 4-angle video for 6 months until the truth in it was unanswerable. Eduardo and Marisol Salinas would, that same spring, pay off the second mortgage with the proceeds of the state's settlement of their civil claim. Marisol would, in the summer, plant a row of tomatoes in the small patch behind El Sol. Eduardo would, in the fall, hire 2 more cooks. The breakfast and lunch business would, by the following year, have grown by a third. Lourdes the interpreter would, every Christmas, receive a tin of homemade polvorons from the Salinas family. She would tuck the tin behind the photographs of her own grandchildren on the windowsill, where she could see it every morning when she made her coffee, and she would think on those mornings about the slow, small grammar of a left hand that had been telling the truth all along. The building, in its quiet and lawful way, kept doing what it was built for. The cameras at El Sol kept running. The Salinas family kept opening at 6 in the morning. The court would, when called upon, listen. The truth, when patiently brought to it, would be heard. The record, when it was complete, would speak. It always, in the end, had.